The delivery room smelled of antiseptic and quiet hope, the kind that made every heartbeat louder than it should be. Amara lay exhausted on the narrow hospital bed, sweat cooling on her forehead. Don't forget to subscribe, share, and kindly hit the like button. It truly means a lot to us. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy. Let's dive into this unforgettable story. Outside the curtained window, rain tapped softly against the glass, as though the sky itself waited for the doctor's verdict. Chinedu, her husband, stood near the wall, arms folded across his chest, staring at the floor tiles instead of his wife. For months, relatives had called him blessed in advance, convinced that Amara would finally deliver the son destined to carry the family's name. 7 years of marriage had already produced daughters, each welcomed with smiles that faded quicker than the celebrations. Today felt different, heavier, like an exam result everyone feared to read aloud. A nurse adjusted the drip beside Amara, offering a gentle smile that failed to hide the tension lingering in the air. "You did well," the nurse whispered, brushing Amara's damp hair from her eyes. "Just rest." But rest was impossible. Amara searched the room until her gaze found Chinedu. He looked tall, handsome, successful yet strangely distant, like a visitor trapped in the wrong place. The newborn's cry pierced the silence, fragile but determined, filling every corner of the room with life. Amara's lips curved into relief as tears gathered at the edges of her eyes. "My baby," she murmured, arms instinctively reaching forward. The doctor stepped closer, carefully lifting the infant wrapped in a soft hospital cloth. For a moment, he said nothing, only studying the tiny face as though measuring the weight of words yet unspoken. Chinedu straightened, breath shallow. The rain outside intensified, drumming against the windows like impatient fingers. "Congratulations," the doctor finally announced, voice gentle but unmistakably clear. "It's a girl." Time stalled. The baby's cry continued bravely, unaware that her arrival had shifted the temperature of the room. Amara held out her arms, smiling through tears of love, but Chinedu did not move. A flicker crossed his face, disappointment, sharp and fleeting yet impossible to miss. It vanished quickly, replaced by a polite nod meant for observers rather than his wife. "Healthy baby," the doctor added, placing the child gently into Amara's embrace. Amara kissed the infant's forehead, inhaling the warm scent of new life. In that instant, nothing else mattered, not expectations, not whispers, not traditions older than memory. Only love. Yet across the room, Chinedu felt the weight of invisible eyes, uncles, neighbors, colleagues who would ask the same question with rehearsed sympathy. "No boy? Again?" The thought tightened around his chest like rope. He imagined family meetings, subtle jokes, advice about second wives delivered with knowing smiles. Pride began whispering louder than reason. Amara noticed his silence even while cradling their daughter. A familiar ache settled beneath her joy, the quiet fear that love might once again be measured against gender. "She's beautiful," Amara said softly, hoping the words might build a bridge between them. Chinedu forced a smile, stepping closer at last. He glanced down at the tiny face, delicate fingers curling around nothing. But instead of pride, uncertainty stirred inside him, planting seeds that would grow into choices neither of them yet understood. Outside, the rain continued falling, washing the dusty hospital compound as though preparing the world for consequences still hidden beyond the horizon of that fragile morning moment none of them would ever forget completely. The naming ceremony was supposed to be joyful, but joy arrived wearing borrowed clothes that didn't quite fit. Plastic chairs filled the compound, relatives gathered beneath a rented canopy, and laughter floated through the air like rehearsed lines from a play everyone knew too well. Amara adjusted the baby in her arms while greeting guests, her smile warm yet cautious. She had learned that happiness in her home often came with silent conditions. Around her, her daughters moved excitedly, their tiny braids decorated with colorful beads that clicked softly as they ran. Chinedu stood near the entrance, shaking hands and accepting congratulations that felt hollow in his ears. Each handshake carried an unspoken question, each smile hiding curiosity sharpened by tradition. At least mother and child are healthy, one uncle said, patting Chinita's shoulder. God's time is the best, another added, the sentence stretching into the familiar comfort offered when expectations were unmet. Chinita nodded politely, but inside, frustration coiled tighter with every comment. He had prepared himself for celebration, for praise, for the triumphant announcement of a son who would silence every whisper. Instead, reassurance surrounded him like pity disguised as kindness. Across the yard, Amara overheard fragments of conversation drifting between women clustered near the cooking pots. "She is strong, that Amara," one woman murmured. "7 pregnancies, and still no boy? Maybe God wants to teach patience." The words were soft, but their impact was sharp. Amara swallowed, rocking the baby gently as though shielding her from sentences she could not yet understand. Later, as food was served and music played from a crackling speaker, Chinita's friend Emeka pulled him aside behind the house where laughter couldn't follow. "My brother, don't take it personally," Emeka began carefully. "These things happen." Chinita exhaled, staring at the dusty ground. "You don't understand. My father had 3 sons. My grandfather had 4. Now look at me." Emeka hesitated. "Children are blessings." "Blessings, yes," Chinita replied, voice tightening. "But legacy matters." The word lingered between them, heavy and immovable. As evening approached, the compound lights flickered on, casting golden halos over guests preparing to leave. Amara watched her daughters chase one another, their laughter bright enough to challenge the fading sun. For a moment, she allowed herself to believe love alone could sustain them. But later that night, when the compound emptied and silence settled, reality returned. Amara entered the bedroom carrying the baby, finding Chinita seated on the edge of the bed, scrolling absent-mindedly through his phone. "You were quiet today," she said gently. "I was tired," he replied without looking up. The answer felt rehearsed. Amara placed the sleeping baby in the crib and turned toward him. "Chinita, talk to me." He sighed, locking the phone. "What is there to say?" "Everything," Amara whispered. A long pause followed, filled only by the ceiling fan's slow rotation. "They will keep talking," Chinita finally said. "My mother already called twice." Amara's heart sank. "And what did she say?" He looked at her then, eyes conflicted. "She asked if we had considered other options." The words struck like cold water. Amara wrapped her arms around herself, fighting the tremor rising within. "Other options?" she echoed. Chinita stood, pacing the room. "I don't know, Amara. I expected things to be different." Tears gathered in her eyes, but she blinked them away. "So did I. But she is our child." Chinita stopped walking, staring at the crib where their daughter slept peacefully, unaware of the debate surrounding her existence. In that quiet room, something shifted, not loudly, not dramatically, but enough to plant distance between 2 hearts, one certain of each other. And, as the night deepened, Amara lay awake beside her sleeping husband, wondering how many daughters it would take before disappointment turned into a decision neither of them could undo. When morning finally came, the morning the 7th pregnancy began, Amara felt a quiet dread she could not explain. Unlike before, there were no excited phone calls, no eager visits from relatives carrying prayers for a son. The house moved normally, yet beneath its routines lived an unspoken tension that pressed against every wall. Chinita had stopped discussing baby names months earlier. Whenever Amara tried to raise the topic, he redirected the conversation toward bills, business, or the children's school schedules. His silence became a language she slowly learned to translate. Hope mixed with fear, love diluted by expectation. That afternoon, dark clouds gathered above the town, stretching like ink across the sky. Amara sat on the veranda, watching her daughters play hopscotch, with chalk drawings fading into dust. Their laughter rose freely, untouched by adult disappointments, and Amara wondered how long innocence could survive inside a home where approval felt conditional. Inside the living room, Chinita listened to his mother on speakerphone. Her voice carried authority sharpened by age and tradition. "My son, this cannot continue," she insisted. "A man must secure his lineage." Chinita rubbed his forehead, pacing slowly. "Mama, it is not something we control." Silence lingered before she responded quietly. "Sometimes control means making difficult choices." The call ended, but the words remained, echoing louder than any argument. Weeks later, labor began just after midnight. Rain hammered the roof as Chinita drove Amara to the hospital, windshield wipers struggling against the storm. Neither spoke. The car filled with the rhythmic sound of rain and Amara's controlled breathing, each contraction tightening the knot of anticipation inside them. At the hospital, nurses moved efficiently, guiding Amara into the delivery ward while Chinidu waited outside. Time stretched mercilessly. He watched other fathers pacing, some smiling, others praying, all suspended between hope and outcome. A sharp cry finally pierced the corridor. Chinidu stood abruptly, heart racing toward a possibility he barely dared to imagine. Moments later, the doctor approached, mask lowered beneath tired eyes. "Congratulations," he said softly. "Mother and baby are fine." Chinita swallowed, waiting. "It's a girl." The word landed heavier than the thunder outside. Chinidu nodded mechanically, but disappointment surged uncontrollably, spilling past restraint built over years. Inside the ward, Amara cradled her newborn, tears of love tracing silent paths down her cheeks. When Chinidu entered, she searched his face for reassurance. "She is beautiful," Amara whispered. Chinidu stared at the child before looking away. Something inside him fractured, not from hatred, but from expectations collapsing under their own weight. Days later, beneath a gray morning sky, Chinidu gathered relatives inside the living room. Amara sensed the gravity immediately, her hands trembling as she sat opposite them. "I have tried," Chinidu began, voice controlled yet distant. "But I cannot continue like this." Amara blinked slowly. "Continue what?" "Our marriage," he replied. Gasps rippled across the room. Tears filled Amara's eyes. "Because of daughters?" Chinidu hesitated, but silence answered louder than denial. "I am still young," he said quietly. "I need a son." The sentence shattered something irreparable. Amara pressed her palm against her mouth, grief rising like floodwater with nowhere to escape. Outside the window, her daughters played unaware that their family was dissolving behind closed curtains. As Chinidu signed the divorce papers days later, rain began falling once more, echoing the storm that had welcomed their seventh daughter into the world. Marking the moment pride triumphed over love forever, changing all their lives ahead in ways none could yet understand fully or escape afterward without consequence or memory of this painful turning point in their shared story, forever etched deeply. The bus station smelled of diesel, roasted corn, and uncertainty. Amara stepped down slowly, balancing a worn travel bag on her shoulder, while her daughters gathered around her like fragile satellites orbiting a fading world. Behind them, the bus that carried their past rumbled away, leaving only dust and the sound of unfamiliar voices. This town was not home. It was simply the place left when every other door had quietly closed. Amara forced a smile, though exhaustion pressed heavily against her bones. "Stay close," she told the girls gently. "We will be fine." The oldest, Adiz, nodded with a seriousness no child should carry. At 12, her eyes already held the weight of responsibilities she never requested. She tightened her grip on her younger sister's hand, silently promising strength she wasn't sure she possessed. They walked past market stalls bursting with color and noise. Yet Amara felt invisible within the crowd. Nobody here knew her story, her heartbreak, or the humiliation that had escorted her departure. That anonymity felt both painful and liberating. After hours of searching, they arrived at a narrow compound with peeling paint and a rusted gate that squealed in protest. The landlord, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes, studied them carefully before unlocking the small single-room apartment. "It is not big," she admitted, "but it is safe." Safe. The word sounded like luxury. Amara thanked her repeatedly, handing over nearly all the money she had left. As the door closed behind the landlord, silence settled inside the tiny room. One mattress lay in the corner, its thin foam struggling to promise comfort for 8 bodies. The younger girls looked around curiously, while Adiz quietly wiped dust from the windowsill. Amara stood motionless, absorbing the reality of their new beginning. No husband, no extended family, no financial cushion. Just determination and 7 lives depending on it. That evening, hunger arrived before hope. Amara counted the remaining coins inside her purse, each clink echoing louder than expected. "We will cook tomorrow," she assured them softly. "Tonight, let us rest." But children's stomachs rarely understand reassurance. Later, as darkness filled the room, Adiz approached her mother. "Mama, I can help." Amara frowned gently. "Help with what?" "Work," Adiz replied. "Maybe I can sell something after school." The suggestion pierced Amara's heart. She had dreamed of protecting her daughters from hardship, yet reality demanded partnership rather than protection. "We will all help," Amara said finally, voice trembling yet firm. Days turned into routines shaped by necessity. Amara began washing clothes for neighbors, her hands raw from soap and endless scrubbing. Adiz sold sachet water after school, her polite smile masking fatigue. The younger girls learned quickly that laughter cost nothing, so they offered freely even when meals were small. One afternoon, as Amara returned from work carrying a bucket of damp laundry, she overheard 2 women whispering near the gate. "That is the woman with many daughters," one murmured. "Abandoned, they say." Amara paused but kept walking. Their words stung, yet something stronger stirred within her defiance. That night, she gathered her daughters on the mattress, their bodies forming a circle of warmth against uncertainty. "Listen to me," Amara began, her voice soft yet unwavering. "Life may be hard, but you are not mistakes. You are not disappointments." 7 pairs of eyes watched her closely. "You are my pride," she continued. "And one day, the world will see what I see." The room felt smaller but brighter somehow, filled with belief rather than despair. As the girls drifted to sleep, Amara remained awake, staring at the cracked ceiling illuminated by moonlight sneaking through the window. Tears slipped quietly down her temples, not from weakness, but from the enormity of the journey ahead. Outside, distant laughter from neighboring rooms reminded her that life continued regardless of personal storms. Amara inhaled deeply, placing her hand over her heart as though sealing a promise within. Tomorrow would demand more strength, more sacrifice, more faith. But for the first time since the divorce, fear was no longer the loudest voice inside her. Determination was. The wedding hall glittered with chandeliers, polished marble floors, reflecting the excitement of guests dressed in vibrant fabrics and confident smiles. Music drifted through the air, blending celebration with quiet curiosity as relatives gathered to witness Chinita's new beginning. At the center of it all stood Chinidu, dressed in an immaculate cream-colored suit, shaking hands and accepting congratulations that felt more triumphant than sympathetic this time. Today, nobody whispered questions about daughters. Today symbolized correction, redemption, expectation fulfilled. Beside him, Ngozi smiled radiantly, her youthful energy captivating the room. She laughed easily, spoke confidently, and moved with the assurance of someone stepping into a future already admired by others. To many, she represented possibility, the woman expected to deliver what the first could not. During the reception, Chinita's mother beamed with visible relief. She moved from table to table greeting guests, her pride unconcealed. "My son deserves happiness," she declared warmly. "God is faithful." Each affirmation wrapped around Chinidu like validation he had long craved. For months after the divorce, doubt had lingered in quiet moments, whispering questions he avoided answering. But tonight, surrounded by approval, those doubts faded beneath applause and laughter. Later, as the evening softened into intimate conversations, Ngozi leaned toward him. "Are you happy?" she asked playfully. Chinidu studied her face, illuminated by golden lights. "Yes," he replied after a pause. "I believe I am." Yet somewhere beneath the certainty, memory flickered 7 small faces, laughter in a courtyard, Amara's tired but hopeful smile. He quickly pushed the images aside, convincing himself that progress required distance from regret. Months passed swiftly, filled with honeymoon warmth and domestic excitement. Ngozi transformed the house with bright curtains, new furniture, and an atmosphere of anticipation that hovered like perfume in every room. When Ngozi announced her pregnancy, celebration erupted immediately. Chinita's mother organized prayer gatherings, neighbors delivered gifts, and Chinita himself walked with renewed confidence, as though destiny had finally aligned with his expectations. Ngozi enjoyed the attention, though pregnancy's discomforts occasionally softened her vibrant demeanor. Still, she remained optimistic, often teasing Chinita about baby names and future football matches in the yard. One humid afternoon, during a routine hospital visit, the doctor smiled reassuringly after completing examinations. "Everything looks good," he said. Chinita's heart pounded as the moment approached. Ngozi squeezed his hand, excitement dancing in her eyes. "Do you want to know the gender?" the doctor asked. "Yes," they answered simultaneously. The doctor chuckled softly before speaking. "You're having a boy." Joy exploded between them. Ngozi laughed loudly, tears forming as she hugged Chinita. He felt a surge of relief, so powerful it bordered on disbelief, as though years of disappointment dissolved within seconds. That evening, the house overflowed with celebration once again. Music played, relatives danced, and congratulatory messages flooded Chinita's phone. "You see?" his mother whispered proudly. "God never forgets." Chinita smiled broadly, lifting a glass during a toast. "To new beginnings," he announced. Yet, amid the laughter, Ngozi watched him quietly for a moment. "What are you thinking?" she asked later when guests departed. Chinita hesitated. "Nothing important." But the truth lingered unspoken. This victory felt like proof, justification, confirmation that his decision years earlier had been correct. When their son was born weeks later, Chinita held him carefully, marveling at the tiny features that seemed to symbolize continuity. Pride swelled inside him, deeper than anything he had previously experienced. Neighbors visited daily, praising the child's resemblance to his father and predicting greatness. The house filled with admiration rather than sympathy, celebration instead of quiet pity. As Chinita watched his newborn sleep one night, satisfaction settled warmly within him. He believed the future had finally corrected the past, that legacy was now secure, that his choices had led him exactly where he was meant to be. But beyond the walls of his contentment, consequences of earlier decisions continued unfolding silently, preparing lessons time would eventually deliver, without mercy or negotiation for him. Morning sunlight spilled through the curtains as laughter echoed across the compound. Chinita stepped onto the veranda, holding his coffee, watching his sons race toy cars along the tiled floor, while their younger brother clapped enthusiastically nearby. The sight filled him with quiet pride, a confirmation he revisited daily like a favorite memory. Ngozi leaned against the doorway, arms folded with affectionate amusement. "They woke up before sunrise again," she said. "Boys have energy," Chinita replied, smiling. "Let them enjoy childhood." Enjoyment became the rhythm of their home. Toys multiplied. Video games replaced chores, and minor misbehavior was often dismissed as harmless exuberance. Whenever teachers mentioned restlessness or unfinished homework, Chinita laughed it off, insisting that brilliance sometimes appeared chaotic. One afternoon, Ngozi sat across from him at the dining table. Report cards spread between them like evidence. "They are struggling," she said carefully. Chinita glanced briefly before shrugging. "Grades improve." Ngozi sighed. "But discipline matters too." Chinita reached for his phone. "They are still young." The conversation ended not with agreement, but with avoidance, a pattern quietly shaping their household. At school, the boys commanded attention through confidence that often bordered on defiance. During break time, they dominated football matches, yet ignored classroom instructions, believing charm could substitute effort. Teachers exchanged concerned glances, while classmates oscillated between admiration and frustration. One evening, the eldest son, Obinna, returned home carrying a note from school. Ngozi read it aloud, her expression tightening. Obinna disrupted class and refused to complete assignments. Chinita chuckled lightly. "He is spirited." Ngozi's patience thinned. Spirited does not mean disrespectful. Obina watched silently, studying which parent would prevail. Chinedu placed a reassuring hand on the boy's shoulder. Just behave next time. The mild response felt like permission rather than correction. Obina nodded, relief evident. Weeks later, a phone call arrived during dinner. Ngozi answered, her smile fading as the principal's voice filled the receiver. There was an incident today, the principal explained. Obina pushed another student during an argument. Ngozi's gaze drifted toward her son. Is he hurt? No serious injuries, but we are concerned. After hanging up, silence settled heavily around the table. Why did you push him? Ngozi asked gently. He insulted me, Obina muttered. Chinedu cleared his throat. Sometimes boys fight. Ngozi stared at him. That cannot be the lesson. Tension lingered long after the meal ended. Ngozi washed dishes with restless movements, while Chinedu retreated to the living room, convincing himself the issue was temporary. But patterns rarely remain small. Months passed, and warnings accumulated quietly: incomplete homework, classroom arguments, careless attitudes toward responsibility. Ngozi attempted structure through schedules and chores, yet enforcement weakened whenever Chinedu intervened with indulgent leniency. One humid afternoon, the second son, Chisholm, arrived home unusually quiet. His uniform was dusty, and his backpack hung loosely from one strap. What happened? Ngozi asked immediately. He hesitated. Nothing. Later that evening, another call shattered the calm. Chisholm had been suspended for skipping class and wandering outside school premises with older boys. Ngozi's voice trembled as she confronted Chinedu. This is serious. Chinedu paced slowly, frustration mingling with denial. They will outgrow it. Ngozi shook her head. Children grow into what we tolerate. Her words lingered long after she left the room. That night, Chinedu watched his sons sleeping peacefully, their innocent faces contradicting the concerns surrounding them. Doubt flickered briefly, but pride quickly extinguished it. He reminded himself that boys were naturally adventurous, that mistakes were stepping stones rather than warnings. Yet beyond his reassurances, consequences gathered momentum, invisible but inevitable. In another part of the city, Amara's daughters studied late into the night beneath a dim bulb, their quiet, disciplined carving futures shaped by resilience rather than indulgence. Two households, two philosophies, two unfolding legacies moving steadily toward intersections neither family could yet foresee. The dim bulb flickered above the small wooden table as Adiz adjusted her notebook, her pen moving steadily despite the late hour. Around her, her sisters occupied every available space in the single room, some reading aloud softly, others solving mathematics problems, all united by determination stronger than exhaustion. Outside, the compound hummed with ordinary night sounds, distant generators, murmured conversations, the occasional barking dog. But inside Amara's room, purpose created its own atmosphere, one built from sacrifice and quiet ambition. Amara watched from the mattress, mending a torn school uniform while pride warmed her tired eyes. Years earlier, she had feared poverty would steal her daughter's futures. Instead, hardship had sharpened them. Adiz, you should sleep, Amara whispered gently. Adiz shook her head without looking up. The exam is tomorrow. Her voice carried resolve that startled even Amara sometimes. Childhood had been replaced by responsibility, yet Adiz never complained. She simply adapted. The next morning, Adiz walked to school before sunrise, textbooks pressed against her chest. The air felt cool and hopeful, as though the world itself paused to witness her quiet perseverance. Inside the classroom, students whispered anxiously before the results were announced. Adiz sat still, hands folded, heart racing beneath practice calm. When the teacher entered holding a stack of papers, silence descended instantly. I am proud of many of you, the teacher began. But one student has set a remarkable example. Adiz's pulse quickened. Adiz Okafor, first position. Applause erupted. Adiz blinked in disbelief as classmates turned toward her with admiration rather than pity. She accepted the paper with trembling hands, her name printed boldly beside scores that represented years of invisible battles. After school, she ran home, breathless with excitement. Her sisters gathered around as she waved the result like a flag of victory. "Mama," she called. Amara looked up from washing clothes, water dripping from her hands. "What is it?" Adiz handed her the paper. For a moment, Amara said nothing. Tears filled her eyes, sliding freely as pride overwhelmed words. She pulled Adiz into a tight embrace, laughter and sobs blending into something sacred. "You see?" Amara whispered. "The world is opening for you." The achievement ignited a chain reaction. Inspired by Adiz's success, her sisters pursued their studies with renewed intensity. Even the youngest began announcing career dreams with bold certainty: doctor, engineer, lawyer, teacher. Weeks later, Adiz received news that altered everything. The principal summoned her to the office, where unfamiliar visitors sat waiting with polite smiles. "We represent a scholarship foundation," one woman explained. "Your academic record is exceptional." Adiz's breath caught. "We would like to sponsor your education through university." The words felt unreal, floating like fragile glass between possibility and disbelief. That evening, Adiz shared the news at home. The tiny room erupted with celebration, laughter, dancing, joyful tears that echoed beyond its cracked walls. Neighbors peeked curiously, drawn by happiness too bright to contain. Amara held Adiz's face gently. "You earned this." But later, as celebration faded into quiet reflection, Adiz sat alone outside beneath a sky crowded with stars. Gratitude filled her heart, yet a familiar ache lingered. She wondered if her father would have been proud. Inside, her sisters slept peacefully, unaware of the thought drifting through Adiz's mind like a cloud refusing to dissolve. Across town, Chinidu attended a school meeting regarding Obina's declining behavior. Frustration replacing pride as teachers expressed concern. Two narratives unfolded simultaneously, one rising through discipline, the other slipping through indulgence. As Adiz gazed upward, she made a silent promise not only to succeed, but to uplift her sisters and honor the woman who refused to abandon them. The night breeze brushed her face gently, carrying whispers of futures still unwritten, yet steadily approaching. And somewhere within that vast sky, destiny continued weaving contrasts between the daughters once rejected and the sons once celebrated, preparing revelations neither household could escape when paths inevitably crossed under circumstances far more revealing than any exam result or disciplinary meeting could ever capture alone. The knock on the gate came just after midnight, sharp and impatient, cutting through the quiet like shattered glass. Ngozi stirred first, sitting upright as confusion replaced sleep. Beside her, Chinidu groaned softly, reluctant to abandon rest for disturbance. "Did you hear that?" Ngozi whispered. Another knock answered, louder this time. Chinidu rose, irritation clouding his face as he walked toward the living room. Outside, the compound lay dark except for the security bulb flickering near the entrance. He opened the door cautiously and froze. Two police officers stood at the gate. "Good evening," one officer said, voice formal yet firm. "Are you Mr. Chinidu Okafor?" A chill traveled down Chinidu's spine. "Yes. We need you to come with us. It concerns your son." Behind him, Ngozi appeared, anxiety etched across her face. "What happened?" The officer hesitated briefly. "There was an incident involving theft at a nearby store." The words echoed painfully in the night air. Minutes later, Chinidu and Ngozi sat inside the police station, fluorescent lights exposing exhaustion and disbelief. Obina sat across the room, shoulders slumped, avoiding eye contact. Beside him stood two other boys whose nervous whispers filled the silence between adult conversations. Chinidu approached slowly. "Obina." The boy looked up, eyes glossy with fear. "Daddy, I didn't mean what happened." Chinidu interrupted, voice trembling between anger and denial. Obina swallowed. "My friend said it was just snacks. That the owner wouldn't notice." Ngozi covered her mouth, tears forming instantly. The officer stepped closer. The shopkeeper reported missing items. CCTV captured them. Reality pressed heavily against Chinidu's chest. This was not classroom mischief or playground arguments. This was public wrongdoing, documented and undeniable. After hours of discussion and a reluctant apology to the shop owner, Obinna was released with a warning. The ride home unfolded in suffocating silence, broken only by the hum of the engine and Ngozi's occasional quiet sniffle. Inside the house, tension erupted. "How could you do this?" Ngozi demanded, voice cracking. Obinna stared at the floor. "I'm sorry." Chinedu paced restlessly, emotions colliding within him. Anger demanded expression, but love complicated punishment. "You embarrassed this family," Ngozi continued. "It was just snacks," Obinna muttered weakly. The minimization struck harder than the act itself. Ngozi sank into a chair, overwhelmed by the realization that boundaries, once ignored, had now blurred dangerously. Chinedu finally spoke, voice low. "Go to your room." Obinna obeyed instantly, relief and shame trailing behind him. Later that night, Ngozi confronted Chinedu in the bedroom. "This cannot continue," she said. "We keep excusing everything." Chinedu rubbed his temples. "He is a child." Ngozi's eyes flashed. "Children become adults shaped by consequences." Her words lingered long after she turned away. Days passed, but peace did not return. Whispers circulated within the neighborhood, subtle yet perceptible. The shop owner's relatives lived nearby, and stories traveled faster than forgiveness. Chinedu noticed neighbors' altered greetings, polite but distant, curiosity lurking behind smiles. At school, Obinna's reputation shifted. Friends joked nervously, while teachers monitored him closely. The incident became a label he could not easily remove. Meanwhile, Chisholm's behavior worsened. Homework disappeared unfinished, classes skipped more frequently, and defiance replaced earlier charm. One afternoon, the principal requested another meeting. "We are concerned," she stated calmly. "There is a pattern forming." Chinedu nodded stiffly, discomfort tightening around his pride. That evening, as he sat alone in the living room, memories surfaced: uninvited daughters studying beneath dim light, Amara's quiet resilience, laughter echoing despite hardship. He shook his head, pushing the thoughts away, unwilling to connect past choices with present struggles. But denial offered only temporary shelter. Across town, Adiz prepared scholarship documents, while her sisters celebrated academic milestones, unaware of the contrasting storm gathering within their father's household. Two stories advanced simultaneously, each shaped by years of unseen decisions. And as Chinedu stared at the silent television screen that night, a question hovered uncomfortably within him: whether the legacy he once fought desperately to secure was slowly unraveling before his eyes without his awareness. The video appeared online before sunrise, spreading across phones and conversations with ruthless speed. By mid-morning, it had reached nearly every corner of the neighborhood, transforming private failure into public spectacle. Chinedu first heard about it from a colleague who approached him cautiously at work. "Have you seen what's circulating?" the man asked, holding out his phone. Chinedu frowned. "Seen what?" The screen displayed a crowded street scene, shouting voices, blurred movement, then unmistakably, Obinna at the center of a violent scuffle. He shoved another boy aggressively, while onlookers recorded rather than intervened. The clip ended with sirens approaching and laughter fading into commentary. For a moment, Chinedu could not breathe. The office noise around him dissolved, replaced by the echo of his son's anger, captured permanently in pixels. "Maybe it's edited," Chinedu muttered, though certainty drained from his voice. His colleague offered sympathetic silence before stepping away. Within hours, messages flooded Chinedu's phone, some concerned, others curious, a few unmistakably judgmental. Each notification felt like a knock on his pride, demanding acknowledgement he was unprepared to give. At home, Ngozi sat rigidly on the sofa, replaying the video with trembling hands. "This cannot be happening," she whispered as Chinedu entered. He dropped his bag heavily. "Where is he?" "In his room." The hallway felt longer than usual as Chinedu approached Obinna's door. He knocked once before entering without waiting. Obinna sat on the bed, headphones around his neck, eyes swollen from crying. "Why?" Chinedu asked quietly. Obinna's voice cracked. They mocked me. So you fought them in public? I didn't think anyone was recording. The answer pierced deeper than expected, revealing a mindset shaped not by regret, but by exposure. Chinedu exhaled slowly, anger colliding with helplessness. Your actions follow you whether cameras are present or not. Obinna lowered his gaze, shame finally surfacing. That evening, neighbors' whispers became audible reality. As Chinedu stepped outside to buy groceries, conversations paused briefly before resuming in lower tones. Passing glances carried recognition, curiosity, and subtle condemnation. Inside a small shop, two women pretended to browse while murmuring. "That is the father," one said softly. "So unfortunate," the other replied. The words trailed behind Chinedu as he left, groceries forgotten. Days later, a formal letter arrived requesting his presence at a community mediation meeting regarding the altercation. The envelope alone felt like accusation. Ngozi held it carefully. "We must go." The meeting unfolded beneath the watchful eyes of elders seated around a wooden table. Obinna stood beside his parents, shoulders hunched as discussions dissected behavior, accountability, and reputation. "This community raises children together," one elder stated. "Public violence affects everyone." Chinedu nodded respectfully, humiliation burning beneath composure. After apologies were exchanged and agreements reached, they returned home in silence heavier than any lecture. Later that night, Ngozi spoke gently yet firmly. "We cannot ignore this anymore." Chinedu stared at the floor. "I know." The admission felt small, but monumental. Across the city, Adiz delivered a speech at her scholarship award ceremony, her voice confident as applause celebrated resilience and achievement. Cameras captured her triumph, broadcasting pride rather than shame. Two recordings existed simultaneously, one honoring discipline, the other documenting consequences. As Chinedu lay awake that night, the contrast haunted him. He remembered dismissing teachers' concerns, excusing misbehavior, equating leniency with love. Now, each memory replayed like evidence presented before an internal court. In the quiet darkness, realization began whispering uncomfortable truths he could no longer silence. Outside, distant laughter echoed from nearby houses, life continuing despite his turmoil. But within Chinedu's heart, something fragile had cracked the belief that legacy could be secured through expectation alone. And as sleep refused to come, one question lingered relentlessly in his mind. How much more shame could his pride endure before truth demanded complete surrender? The convoy arrived just after noon, sleek vehicles gliding into the town like quiet declarations of transformation. Curious residents gathered along the roadside, shielding their eyes from sunlight as tinted windows reflected unfamiliar success back at them. Word spread quickly. Important visitors had come. At the center of the procession, Adiz stepped out first, her posture confident yet humble, dressed in professional elegance that hinted at journeys far beyond the dusty streets of her childhood. Behind her, her sisters emerged one after another, each carrying the aura of accomplishment shaped by years of resilience. The town buzzed with excitement. Market traders paused mid-sale, school children whispered eagerly, and elders nodded with approving smiles. Recognition rippled outward. These were the daughters, once seen leaving quietly with their mother, now returning as symbols of possibility. Amara stood near the entrance of the newly renovated community health center, hands clasped tightly as anticipation fluttered within her chest. She had been told her daughters were sponsoring a project, but witnessing it unfold felt surreal. Adiz approached, eyes glistening. "Mama." Amara's composure dissolved instantly as she embraced her daughter, pride and gratitude colliding into tears neither attempted to hide. The sisters joined the hug, laughter breaking through emotion as cameras captured a reunion built on perseverance rather than circumstance. Community leaders gathered for the unveiling ceremony. A banner draped across the building read, "Okafor Women Community Health Wing." Applause erupted as Adiz stepped forward to speak. "This town raised us," she began, voice steady yet warm. "Our mother taught us that hardship is not the end of a story, but the beginning of purpose." Amara lowered her gaze, overwhelmed by recognition she had never sought. Across town, Chinedu sat inside his office, reviewing documents, when a colleague burst through the door. "Have you seen the news?" the man asked excitedly. Chinedu frowned. "What news?" His colleague handed over a phone, displaying photos from the ceremonies at the podium, her sisters beside her, Amara smiling proudly as dignitaries applauded. Headlines praised their philanthropic initiative and academic achievements. Chinedu stared at the screen, disbelief flooding his senses. "These are your daughters, right?" the colleague asked carefully. Chinedu nodded slowly, words abandoning him. Memories resurfaced without invitation. Laughter in courtyards, school uniforms he once ignored, Amara's quiet determination. Now those fragments assembled into a narrative he had never bothered to follow. That evening, the town celebrated the project's completion with music and speeches. Residents shared stories of how the health center would improve lives, each testimony reinforcing the daughter's impact. Meanwhile, Chinedu remained home, replaying images online repeatedly. Pride wrestled with regret, admiration tangled with guilt. Ngozi entered the living room cautiously. "You saw?" "Yes," he replied softly. She sat beside him. "They have done well." Chinedu swallowed. "Very well." Silence lingered before he spoke again. "I didn't know." Ngozi glanced at him gently. "Sometimes we stop looking." Her words settled deeply. Later that night, Adiz and her sisters walked through familiar streets, laughter echoing as childhood memories resurfaced. Yet beneath the joy, an unspoken question lingered among them, whether their father knew they were back. Amara sensed it too, but said nothing, allowing time to decide conversations the heart feared initiating. As Chinedu stood by his window, watching distant fireworks from a celebration, realization expanded within him like slow dawn. The legacy he had once dismissed was now illuminating the very community that witnessed his earlier decisions. Across the night sky, bursts of color painted fleeting brilliance before fading into darkness, mirroring emotions swirling inside him. And as applause echoed faintly through the distance, Chinedu found himself confronting a possibility he had avoided for years, that greatness had grown from the very roots he once uprooted without understanding their strength. The cafe sat quietly at the edge of town, its open windows welcoming the afternoon breeze, carrying faint market sounds. Adiz stirred her tea absent-mindedly, her sisters chatting softly around the table, while Amara watched them with calm contentment. Their visit had been filled with reunions, ceremonies, and laughter, yet one conversation remained untouched. "Do you think he knows we're here?" Kayamaka asked cautiously. Amara hesitated before answering. "This town does not keep secrets." The statement lingered between them, equal parts truth and invitation. Across town, Chinedu paced his living room, rehearsing sentences that dissolved before completion. Since seeing the ceremony online, sleep had become restless and memories relentless. Each achievement of his daughters illuminated a decision he could no longer justify. Ngozi observed him quietly from the doorway. "You can still go," she said gently. Chinedu stopped pacing. "After all these years?" She nodded. Regret grows heavier when carried alone. Her words nudged him toward courage he had postponed for too long. Later that afternoon, Chinedu approached the cafe with hesitant steps. The familiar bell above the door chimed softly as he entered, drawing curious glances from patrons. His gaze scanned the room until it landed on them 7 young women and the woman he once called his wife. Time folded inward. Adiz noticed him first, her expression freezing between surprise and recognition. Conversation faded as the sisters followed her gaze. Amara turned last, composure steady yet eyes revealing 1,000 remembered moments. Chinedu stood motionless, suddenly uncertain of movement, speech, or entitlement to either. Adiz rose slowly. "Daddy." The word bridged years in a single breath. "I." "Hello," Chinedu replied, voice fragile. Silence enveloped the table, not hostile, but heavy with unspoken history. Chinedu approached cautiously, each step weighted by reflection. "You've grown," he murmured, studying faces that mirrored childhood memories, yet radiated independence. "We had to," One sister replied softly, not accusatory, but factual. Chinita nodded, absorbing the truth within her words. He turned toward Amara, emotions colliding visibly. Amara. She met his gaze calmly. Chinidu. The simplicity of the greeting carried dignity rather than bitterness. I don't know where to begin, he admitted. Adiz gestured toward an empty chair. You can sit. He did, hands clasped tightly as though holding himself together. I was wrong, Chinita began, voice trembling. I let pride speak louder than love. I thought legacy meant sons, but I see now how blind I was. Tears gathered, but he continued. I hurt you. I abandoned you. And I cannot return those years. The cafe remained hushed, even distant conversations pausing respectfully around the unfolding moment. Amara inhaled deeply before responding. You did hurt us. The honesty landed gently yet firmly. But pain did not stop our journey, she added. Chinita nodded, tears slipping freely. I am proud of you all. Even if I have no right to claim it. Adiz reached across the table, placing her hand over his. Pride is not ownership. He looked at her, surprised. It is recognition, she continued. One by one, the sisters echoed quiet affirmations, not rehearsed forgiveness, but reflections of healing achieved long before this meeting. We forgave you years ago, Kayamika said softly. Holding anger would have chained us to the past. Emotion overwhelmed Chinidu as relief intertwined with regret. Amara spoke last. Forgiveness does not erase consequences, but it frees hearts. Tears blurred Chinita's vision as gratitude replaced fear. For the first time in years, conversation flowed cautious yet genuine. Stories were shared. Laughter surfaced hesitantly, and the distance between them shortened not through time reversal, but through acceptance. As the sun dipped toward evening, casting golden light across the cafe, Chinidu realized reconciliation was not a destination, but a beginning offered through grace rather than entitlement. And as they prepared to leave together, one quiet question lingered within him, whether he could learn to forgive himself enough to embrace the fragile second chance unfolding before him. The courthouse corridor buzzed with quiet conversations and shuffling footsteps, yet Chinidu heard none of it. He sat rigidly on the wooden bench, fingers interlocked as though holding himself together. Across the hall, Ngozi spoke softly with their lawyer, while Obinna and Chisholm waited nearby, eyes lowered beneath the weight of consequences no parent ever wishes to witness. Outside the courtroom doors, families gathered for unrelated cases, yet Chinidu felt exposed as though every stranger knew his story. Years earlier, he had imagined sons as pillars of pride. Today, those dreams trembled under reality's glare. The bailiff called their case, and they entered slowly. Proceedings unfolded with formal precision, detailing charges stemming from repeated delinquent behavior and the recent violent incident captured online. Each statement echoed like a verdict on choices extending beyond the boys themselves. Chinita listened as testimonies described missed opportunities, ignored warnings, and escalating misconduct. None of it was unfamiliar, yet hearing it publicly stripped away denial's final shelter. He glanced toward his sons, recognizing fear where confidence once lived. After deliberation, the judge delivered a measured ruling. Community rehabilitation programs, supervised service, and mandatory counseling. Not imprisonment, but accountability impossible to evade. Relief mingled with shame inside Chinita's chest as the gavel concluded the session. Outside, sunlight felt unexpectedly harsh. Ngozi exhaled deeply, wiping silent tears. Obinna shifted awkwardly. I'm sorry, Daddy, he murmured. Chinita studied him, recognizing both remorse and immaturity. Sorry must become change, he replied gently. That evening, Adiz and her sisters prepared for the Foundation Awards ceremony celebrating youth leadership initiatives. Amara adjusted her simple gown while laughter filled the hotel suite, excitement sparkling like distant music drifting upward. You deserve this, Mama, Adiz said, fastening a bracelet around her wrist. Amara smiled softly. We deserve peace. As guests gathered inside the grand ballroom, applause greeted stories of resilience and service. When the Okafor daughters were announced, the audience rose instinctively, honoring achievements rooted in perseverance rather than privilege. Unbeknownst to them, Chinidu entered quietly, taking a seat near the back. Curiosity and longing had guided him there, an uninvited witness to a narrative he once abandoned. On stage, Adiz spoke with calm conviction. Our mother taught us that worth is not assigned at birth, but revealed through character. The words reached Chinidu like gentle thunder. She continued, legacy is not about sons or daughters, but about values carried forward. Tears blurred Chinidu's vision as applause filled the hall. When Amara was invited to receive recognition for community mentorship, she walked onto the stage with quiet grace that silenced every lingering doubt about her strength. Later during the reception, Adiz spotted Chinidu standing alone. She approached with a gentle smile. You came. I needed to see, he admitted. One by one, the sisters joined them, conversation unfolding easily beneath warm lights and softer histories. Ngozi arrived as well, offering quiet support rather than competition. Chinidu looked around at both families, Consequences and Grace sharing the same space. I spent years chasing the wrong legacy, he confessed. Amara met his gaze, understanding that is its own inheritance. Music swelled as guests danced, laughter weaving through reflections of journeys survived. Chinidu watched his daughters move confidently across the room, pride finally uncomplicated by expectation. Later beneath the quiet night sky, he stood beside Amara. Thank you for raising them so well. She smiled gently. Thank them for choosing who they became. Chinidu nodded slowly, understanding